You think you're in control, that every decision you make comes from logic, from reason, from some clean, calculating part of your brain that weighs the facts and picks the best option. But what if I told you that's a myth, a comforting illusion? The truth is far messier and far more human. Let's start with the science. Daniel Kahneman, Nobel Prize-winning psychologist, shook the foundations of modern thinking with a simple idea. Your brain isn't one voice, it's two. System 1 and System 2. System 1 is fast, automatic, emotional. It's the part of you that flinches when something jumps at you, that finishes other people's sentences, that makes snap judgments. System 2 is slow, effortful, deliberate. It's the part that does your taxes, plans your career, reads this script and questions its logic. Now here's the kicker: most of your decisions, even the ones you think are rational, start in System 1, your gut, your instinct, your emotions. And System 2? It's not a judge, it's a lawyer. It doesn't guide the decision, it just justifies it. After the fact. In other words, you feel first, then you rationalize, you decide, then you explain. And this, right here, is the myth of the rational mind. You're not a machine, you're a storyteller. Your conscious brain isn't in control, it's just good at pretending it is. And this isn't new. Over 2,000 years ago, Plato gave us a metaphor: the chariot. Imagine your soul as a charioteer trying to steer two horses. One horse is noble, rational. The other is wild, passionate, emotional. The charioteer represents reason, logic, discipline. The horses, your impulses, desires, drives. Now ask yourself, who really controls the chariot? You'd like to think it's the rider, but if the wild horse runs, if it bolts, logic gets dragged. That's your brain. That's your life. You're constantly trying to steer your desires with willpower, with discipline. But unless you understand the forces pulling the reins, you'll lose control. Every time. This is what modern behavioral economics explores. We aren't rational actors. We're biased, predictably irrational. We procrastinate. We overreact. We chase short-term rewards. We fear loss more than we value gain. And we build stories, narratives, to make it all seem coherent. We think buying that car was about fuel economy, that dating that person was about shared values. But often, the truth is simpler. It felt right. It felt good. And we built the logic around the feeling. That's not weakness. That's human nature. And the danger comes when you don't see it, when you confuse the story for the source. Most people spend their lives mistaking justification for judgment. They assume that because they can explain their choice, they made it logically. But logic is a mask. It's a post-rationalization, a script written after the act. The decision was made before you even realized it. This doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're human. But if you want real power, if you want to lead, to grow, to transform, you need to understand this architecture. You need to see the machine. So let's go deeper. Why do we have two systems? Because evolution doesn't care about logic. It cares about speed, survival. The faster you can detect a threat, the better your chances of staying alive. That's System 1. It's ancient, hardwired, but it's also flawed. It reacts, it generalizes. It uses shortcuts, heuristics that often miss the mark. And yet, because it acts quickly and confidently, we trust it, even when it's wrong. System 2? That's the newer part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex. Slow, rational, but energy-hungry. Lazy. It doesn't like to work unless it has to. So most of the time, it sits back. Let System 1 take over. That's why you buy things you don't need. Say things you regret. Avoid hard conversations, not because you're irrational, but because your brain is efficient, predictable, and unless you interrupt the pattern, it will keep running the show. Now here's the dangerous part. In a world built on marketing, manipulation, and media, your System 1 is constantly being hijacked. Every click, every ad, every perfectly crafted message is designed to trigger emotion, dopamine, desire. And your rational mind? It's asleep at the wheel. But because you can explain the purchase, the post, the like, you think it was your idea. That's the illusion. And it runs deep. Even your identity, who you think you are, is shaped by stories. Some inherited, some self-made. But all filtered through emotion, through experience, through bias. You think you're the author, but most of the time you're just reading the script. So what can you do? How do you reclaim control? You start by accepting the truth. You are not one voice. You are a system, a pattern, a loop of feelings, thoughts, and actions. And if you want to change your life, you don't start with logic. You start with awareness, with observation. When you feel a strong urge to act, pause, ask, where's this coming from? Is this impulse based on fact or fear, on values or validation? That pause is powerful. It creates space for System 2 to engage, not to override, but to question, to slow the loop. This is how you begin to steer the chariot, not by whipping the horses, but by understanding them, training them, aligning them. You can't suppress emotion, but you can reshape it, reframe it, build new associations. That takes repetition, intention, work, but it's possible. This is what cognitive behavioral therapy teaches, what Stoic philosophy preaches, what modern neuroscience confirms. That emotion isn't the enemy, it's the signal, the driver. And when you learn to read it, not run from it, you gain power. You stop reacting, you start responding, you stop lying to yourself in the name of logic. And you begin to live with clarity, with depth, with authenticity. Most men think power comes from domination, from controlling every variable, every outcome. But real strength? It comes from awareness, from mastering the only domain you truly control, your inner world, your reactions, your responses, your impulses. That's what separates the impulsive boy from the integrated man, the one who follows every feeling from the one who filters it, who questions it, who leads it. Because here's the truth. Your emotions aren't wrong, your instincts aren't bad, but they are old, outdated. And unless you update the software, you'll keep repeating the same mistakes, the same regrets, the same patterns of pain. You'll keep thinking you're in control, while something else drives the wheel. And one day you'll wake up asking, how did I get here? Why do I feel stuck, lost, unfulfilled? The answer won't be in your logic. It'll be in the moments you stopped thinking and started reacting. This is why awareness is everything. Self-honesty, radical responsibility, not for outcomes, but for ownership. Of your patterns, your defaults, your decisions. That's where growth lives, in the space between trigger and action, between emotion and choice. That's where the man is made, in the margin. And that margin gets bigger the more you train it, the more you question, the more you study yourself like a scientist, with curiosity, not condemnation. Every reaction is data. Every impulse is information. Use it, study it, grow from it. Because the myth of the rational mind isn't just about psychology. It's about identity, about power, about freedom. You can't escape your biology, but you can master it. You can't erase emotion, but you can elevate it. You can't stop making biased choices, but you can make conscious ones. And that shift, from unconscious reaction to conscious creation, that's the transformation. That's how you go from driven to deliberate, from passive to powerful, from puppet to pilot. That's how you stop being a passenger in your own life and start becoming the architect. It doesn't happen overnight, but it starts now, with this awareness, this message, this moment. You are not the voice in your head, you are the one who hears it. And the more you listen, the more you question, the more you lead, the more your life becomes yours. Not a script, not a program, a creation, one choice at a time. And yet perhaps the most haunting part of our illusion is this. We believe we are the authors of our own thoughts, that the voice in our head, narrating, choosing, rationalizing, is the captain steering the ship. But what if that voice is more like the PR team, explaining, justifying, smoothing over decisions made elsewhere? decisions made without its knowledge or consent. This idea is not new. In fact, it echoes across millennia. Plato's chariot allegory from the Phaedrus frames the soul as a charioteer struggling to control two horses, one noble, one wild. The charioteer, our reason, does not drive the horses with ease. He is at their mercy as much as they are at his. Kahneman's System 1 and System 2 are not so different. System 1 is fast, automatic, emotional. It leaps before looking, acts before asking. System 2 is slower, deliberate, and lazy. It only engages when it must, and even then, it often rubber stamps System 1's decision after the fact. So much of what we consider thinking is actually rationalization. We are not logic machines, but meaning machines, post hoc architects of our instincts. This dissonance between who we believe we are and how we actually operate is the foundation of our modern predicament. It's not just that we make bad decisions, it's that we're unaware of why we made them and then construct entire identities to justify them. The ancient Stoics urged us to know ourselves, but how can one know what one cannot see? If we are shadows dancing in Plato's cave, who among us will turn and look at the fire? In behavioral economics, this blindness has a name: bounded rationality. We do not have perfect information. We do not have unlimited time, and we are not purely rational beings. Instead, we use heuristics, mental shortcuts that help us survive, not necessarily thrive. These heuristics, though useful, create biases: anchoring, confirmation bias, loss aversion, the sunk cost fallacy. We do not see the world as it is. We see it as we've been conditioned to see it. And yet, despite all of this, we walk through life like sovereign kings of choice, as if every decision we make is a reflection of clear thought and moral certainty. This arrogance is dangerous. It leads us to blame others for their failures and overestimate the nobility of our successes. But if you pull back the curtain, you'll see the machinery, the algorithms, the chemical loops. You'll see how trauma masquerades as preference, how fear dresses up as caution, how habit overrules conviction. We are not as free as we think we are. But don't mistake this for fatalism. Recognizing the illusion is the first step to transcending it. Just as the charioteer learns to work with his horses, not against them, we can begin to design environments, habits, and narratives that guide our subconscious toward wiser outcomes. This is the project of philosophy, not to escape the human condition, but to shape it with eyes wide open. Freedom, in this view, is not the absence of influence, but the awareness of it. To choose with clarity, even when clarity is hard-won. Modern life exacerbates the problem. Our attention is hijacked. Our desires are engineered. Tech companies employ armies of behavioral psychologists to keep us scrolling, clicking, buying. The dopamine economy thrives on our unawareness. And when we falter, when we binge, procrastinate, or self-sabotage, we blame ourselves, not the architecture around us. This is not accidental. A system that profits from our impulsivity teaches us to worship self-control, so we internalize failure instead of questioning the game. But if we are to reclaim our agency, we must begin by asking, who benefits from my blindness? Whose goals are served by my autopilot? What beliefs have I inherited that were never truly mine? In truth, we live at the intersection of competing forces: nature and nurture, impulse and intention, chaos and order. The question is not whether we can eliminate bias or master every thought. The question is whether we can build awareness into the system, whether we can pause long enough to ask, who is making this choice and why? Philosophers from the East and West alike have grappled with this. The Buddha spoke of mindfulness, not just as a practice, but as a liberation. The Stoics spoke of the logos, the rational principle of the universe, and urged us to align our lives with it. Descartes began with doubt, not certainty, and Nietzsche reminded us that we must become who we are, not by default, but through deliberate self-overcoming. So where does this leave us? Perhaps with a more humble view of the self. One that acknowledges the layered complexity of our cognition. One that sees emotion not as the enemy of reason, but as its foundation. One that accepts that the rational mind is not a tyrant, but a negotiator, working constantly with forces beyond its control. And this humility is not weakness, it is strength. Because it invites us to become students of ourselves, to question the default, to reprogram the code, to take responsibility not for everything, but for what is within reach. This is the paradox of enlightenment. To gain control, we must first surrender the illusion of control. To make better decisions, we must admit that most of our decisions are made for us, by culture, by conditioning, by unconscious associations. But once we see this, once we really see it, we can begin to intervene. Slowly, gently, with intention. We can architect our environments to cue better choices. We can develop rituals to train our attention. We can surround ourselves with people who hold us to our higher selves. And most importantly, we can practice, not perfection, but presence, not certainty, but curiosity. We can become aware of the horse, the rider, the reins. We can become conscious. In the end, the myth of the rational mind isn't just about psychology. It's about identity. We believe we are thinking beings who feel, but perhaps we are feeling beings who think, occasionally and not always well. This truth doesn't diminish us. It makes us more whole, more honest. It calls us to integrate the chariot, the horses, the road ahead, to steer not with denial, but with dialogue, and to remember that the self is not a static entity, but a process, one that unfolds one decision at a time. Even now, as you listen to these words, choices are being made beneath your awareness. Your emotional state, your posture, your memories, the lighting in your room, all are contributing to how this message lands, and yet something in you is still choosing to engage. That spark of awareness, that sliver of free will, is the most precious thing you have. Nourish it, guard it, expand it. Because in a world that profits from your reactivity, your reflection is an act of rebellion. And in a world that rewards conformity, your consciousness is a revolution. You may never be fully rational, but you can become deeply aware. You can become wise, and that perhaps is even more powerful.